Welcome into Words with Wallace. I'm your host, Nick Wallace, coming at you. It is Monday, March 4th. What is up, everybody? Hopefully, you guys enjoyed another week of NBA basketball. There's certainly plenty to talk about because if you guys missed it, LeBron James continues to set records in the NBA, surpassing 40,000 points the other night just to lose to Denver in the same game. In the West, you have Booker out at least a week, and the play-in race is heating up in really both conferences. But frankly, I'm not worried about any of that because as I sit here and record on March 4th, my team is absolutely on fire. If you guys missed it, missed the shirt, missed the green background, we're talking about the Boston Celtics. And so, as I was watching the Celtics just absolutely spank the Warriors on Sunday, and they actually won by 50 points, and I think they were up by about 45 in the second quarter. So it was an absolute massacre and certainly felt like the team exercised some demons. And as I was sitting there watching it, I was like, I'm terrible at my job. And I know that this isn't my job, but my job is a podcaster, right? Because really, I've barely talked about the Celtics all year, and they've been dominant all year. This really isn't anything new, and now they are absolutely on fire in the midst of an 11-game winning streak, and we're going to go into further details on exactly setting the scene, but it's really just on me because, again, when I wanted to start a podcast, I did it for other reasons outside of just to brag about my team. I mean, that's certainly been an added perk to this little job that I've had going for the past year and some change. I try not to talk about the team too much because I want to cover the entire NBA instead of just my own hometown team. But that being said, it's really unavoidable at this point. And so my excuse as to why I haven't talked about them recently is because they've just been so damn good all year long that there's not a lot to say, right? Like, yeah, they were great in October. They were better in November, and they've just continued to be awesome. They've had the number one seed the entire year. They've been atop the odds to win the championship all year. So really, I need some turmoil, right? I need some controversy to really fire up an episode. At the very least, I need to get my guy RJ on, who was not able to come on the pod this week. It definitely doesn't feel right talking about the C's without him. That being said, congrats to RJ. He recently got married, so make sure you guys send him a message there. We will have RJ on soon, certainly before the playoffs start. But that being said, I needed to focus on my team in this episode because, again, they're absolutely on fire. And so let's just set the scene a little bit and answer the question that I've been really asking myself all weekend. Is this the Celtics year? Is this finally going to be the year where they hang banner 18 in the Boston Garden? Let's talk about it, right? Because currently, as I sit here and record, the team is 48-12. That's a pretty unbelievable figure on its own, but it's really more dominant than what that stat even tells you. They're currently 8 games up on the Bucks in the Eastern Conference, 6 games up overall on the next closest team, which I believe is the Thunder in the West. They're on track to be a 65-plus win team, which is a really insane threshold that, typically most years we don't even have a team that gets that many wins, so that's saying something. They're currently, again, on an 11-game win streak, and again, fresh off that absolute ass-beating of the Golden State Warriors, who definitely, since the 2022 finals, have had their number a bit. Even in some of the regular season games since that finals series, the Warriors have gotten the better of the Celtics and definitely felt like the team, again, exercised some demons in that game yesterday. And not only that, I mean, the advanced analytics absolutely love this team. I've never been that big on the advanced analytics. I don't still fully understand what all those numbers represent. But just to give you a ballpark of what those numbers are saying, the team is first in offensive rating. They're second in defensive rating. Obviously, by that property, they are also first in net rating by an absolutely massive margin, by the way. Just to put it in terms, the Celtics are first at 11.6, and the next closest team is OKC at 8.0 in second. So again, a gap of 3.6 in net rating is massive for those that have never really looked at that figure. And there's just even more stats out there, especially in the advanced analytics lane, that love the Celtics and even rank them historically with some of the best teams all time, which, again, we're certainly not getting that carried away, but it is worth mentioning how much the numbers love this team. But more so, again, I watch this team nearly every game. I can't pretend to catch them every single time because I do have a life outside of basketball, but I watch this team obviously more than any other team this year, and let me just tell you why I am starting to believe in this team. And first and foremost, they just look unstoppable, right? Every single eye test that you watch when you're watching the Celtics is really passed, right? Offensively, they're completely bought in, and they seem to win in a different way, basically each and every night, right? You have 5 guys that are certainly playing at an all-star level in their starting lineup. It's been called a super team, and the public persona and NBA Twitter out there seems to label this team as a super team, and I understand why. Because good luck hiding a single below average defender on this team, especially in the playoffs. They can really matchup hunt on like any other team in the NBA right now with their ability to, again, whether it's Derek White, Drew Holiday, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kristaps Porzingis, it really doesn't matter who you try to hide that player on. I mean, even just in like the Mavericks game the other night, and even more so against the Mavericks when I saw the Celtics play them in person, last month, is again, they were just hunting Luka. They were matchup hunting. They're hunting Kyrie. And, obviously that's a poor example because the Mavericks are a pretty pitiful defensive team. But that being said, really, especially when you get into the playoffs, it really becomes all about hunting those best matchups. And the Celtics are better suited to do that than nearly any other team in the NBA. And frankly, defensively, I feel even better about this team than I do on offense. That's something that's been a lock on this team and a staple. It's like the defensive numbers for the Celtics and the advanced analytics behind our defense ever since halfway through the season 2 years ago, the year we ended up making the finals, and we had that insane January and totally turned the team upside down right before the trade deadline and right before the All-Star break. Ever since then, the Celtics defense has been basically atop the league, certainly in the top 5 in really every metric that you look at. And this year, it's even better. I mean, frankly, they've improved a bit on the defensive end when you look at the numbers. And then just, again, to the eye test, like, who are you attacking out there? If our starting lineups out there are even our top 6, if you include Al Horford, who, again, we've had to dust him off from time to time, but his usage and his minutes are way down as they should be, given his advanced age. He's still going to be likely that first guy off the bench in the playoffs, and good luck attacking him on the defensive end of the court. He's unbelievable as well. And so again, defensively, I'm even more confident in everything we have going on. And again, when I think about our team and why I could see this team winning a title, the first thing I think about is our backcourt. Both of those guys just make lives an absolute living hell for the other team's ball handlers, who again, those are going to be the players on virtually every matchup that the Celtics see that really set the tone for whoever we're playing. Really, besides maybe a matchup against Denver, I guess. But the fact that they're also really talented shot blockers and they can protect the rim at a high level as well just allows the Celtics to switch everything, which I think they'll do even more of once we get closer to the playoffs as well. And then, of course, being able to add Kristaps Porzingis, who's just been an absolute joy to watch. One of the most efficient post scorers in the league. And I know it's a league where post scoring is dead, so that's not saying much for him to be leading the league in that category. But again, these are really efficient post ups. He just dominating smaller matchups, and I feel like he's really underrated as a driver as well. Obviously having the ability to space the floor, so our spacing is always impeccable, really regardless of what matchup we throw out there. Shooting 38% from 3 and really just doesn't get enough credit for some of his decision making as well. Now, despite the fact that, again, the Celtics passed the eye test in my opinion, and I know I'm a biased fan, but I do think I can be relatively critical when it comes to my favorite team, so if they weren't playing at the level I'd expect, I'd certainly be the first one to let you guys know. But that being said, the eye test checks out, the numbers obviously check out, and all the advanced analytics are screaming that they are overwhelming favorites to win the title this year. But I still can't help but feel like, the feeling around this team and the general consensus about the Celtics is that they don't think that they're actually going to get it done. That maybe there's some reservations about this team and this group. So I just wanted to go through the exercise of going through some real tweets that I've seen on NBA Twitter, on Nerd Twitter, on Stan Twitter, on those guys with like the pictures of LeBron and it's like LeBron World and shit like that. Those accounts that drive everybody nuts. They do make up a very large percent of NBA Twitter, we'll say. So that being said, I do feel like when you see the same message being reiterated by multiple of those random accounts that it could be worth mentioning. So let's just go through the exercise of what the Celtics haters on Twitters are saying and see if there's any merit, see if we can debunk it and kind of go from there. So the first sentiment that I've seen reiterated across Twitter is that, let's give it a quote, right? Frauds. They've been good in the regular season for the past 7+ years, but they've never gotten it done. What makes you think it'll be any different this year? To that, I would say sure, right? In some regards, they're absolutely right in saying the Celtics have certainly been in the conversation the past several years. They've made the playoffs every single year we've had Tatum and Brown, our longest tenured Celtics. But were they ever your pick to win the title? Did you ever really think that the Celtics were going to get over the hump and win? Were they ever an overwhelming favorite like what they were this year? I feel like the answer is no. I mean, I certainly was bullish on the team last year and thought they had a real chance to win it all, but it certainly was not nearly as confident as what I am right now. So I would just really ask yourself, like, again, I think a lot of the recent success of this team has been over exceeding expectations, right? Obviously making it to the conference finals when Tatum was a rookie and Brown was in his second year. And then, going further past that, making it to the conference finals again against the Heat in the bubble, which was a really bizarre season, and then made it all the way to the finals in 22, which you maybe would make the argument that that was their best chance, certainly the closest they came. But I still don't think people were, bending over backwards to pick the Celtics in that series. I know the analytics loved them that year, but I felt like, again, the general consensus wasn't that high. So, sure, you can say that they've been frauds in the past, but I don't think they were ever anyone's pick heading into the playoffs like they are this season. Next tweet, next sentiment that we'll say. Kristaps is made of glass, and he won't make it through the playoffs. That's definitely valid, right? There's definitely injury concerns with the Celtics, and certainly with Kristaps, given his vast injury history. But I would just beg the question is, like, what team isn't worried about injuries? As much as I love the NBA, it can certainly get to a point where it feels really frustrating that ultimately it's not even necessarily the best team that ends up winning. It just ends up being the team that's the healthiest at the end of the year. Most notably, obviously, the 2019 finals comes to mind, where the Warriors just like broke down before everybody's eyes throughout that 7-game series, losing Klay Thompson, losing Kevin Durant, and ultimately losing the series of the Raptors when everybody and their mother would have picked Golden State straight up in that series. So it does happen where other teams get hurt, and the Celtics are certainly not immune to any of the injury concerns, especially with Kristaps. But like, what team doesn't have at least one injury question mark at this point in the season? Like, let's start in the East. You got Philadelphia's dealing with the Joel Embiid injury right now. You have the Suns that have been super inconsistent in terms of injury health, especially with Booker, most notably, again, missing at least a week with this most recent ankle injury. You got KD, who's been banged up for many different playoff series. The Clippers have just about everybody that could go down at any given point in time. So if you're just going to point to injuries for the Celtics, like, say, sure, I hear you, but again, any team can say that. Moving on to the next sentiment I've seen on NBA Twitter. Tatum is a bum who chokes in the playoffs. That one I don't have a lot of patience for. Again, I can criticize Tatum. I can say he takes too many threes. I can say he should be more aggressive with his shot selection. But I would also implore you to see 2023 round 2 in the playoffs against the 76ers, in which he has an NBA record 51 points in game 7. So again, not super concerned about Tatum either. But let's just, for the sake of this argument, circle back to, again, the point that the Celtics have had some very competitive teams over the past several years, and they just have never been able to make it over the hump. Well, what has changed about this team? And let's just start off with, again, Drew Holiday, right? Obviously, on paper, the roster changes are significant, so let's just start there. Adding Drew Holiday, just to have, obviously, one of the best guard defenders in the NBA. But not only that, just somebody that is so bought in to what we are doing as a team. Like, his usage rate is way down, which is really notable, especially considering Drew is in a contract year, and I certainly hope he stays with the team. And above that, he's actually won an NBA title. To now have somebody in our locker room that's not just some like old wily veteran on the bench that won a title like 3 teams ago. Like, no, this is Drew Holiday. In his last stop in Milwaukee, he understood what it took to get over the hump, and he was playing a pretty similar role on that Bucks team, actually an increased role on that Bucks team than what we need him to do on a night-to-night basis. Adding him is honestly what gives me the most confidence and is the largest differentiating factor in this team. Obviously, adding Kristaps as well. I've already kind of gone into the details of why it's great to have a 7'3" monster out there who also shoots the shit out of the basketball. But he really just adds a dimension to this team that we have never had anything close in my lifetime of being a fan of this team. It's really unbelievable everything he offers. Also worth noting on the coaching side of things as well, we don't have a rookie head coach anymore, right? I think just the learning curve for a rookie head coach in the NBA, I can't pretend to imagine what that's like, but I'd imagine it's pretty significant. And just the jump from year 1 to year 2 on its own is notable. And then adding the fact that we actually have a fortified assistant coaching staff this year. We didn't have a situation where we lost half of our staff and our head coach right before the season started like we did last year. We actually brought in notable names in NBA circles, guys like Charles Lee, guys like Sam Cassell. And I do feel like, for what it's worth, the coaching's been better this year. It is hard to tell, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Next sentiment and thing that's changed is that Jaylen Brown is happy and Jaylen Brown is paid. If you guys can think back to last year, there was definitely real conversations going on at this point in the season that were only taken to another level when Jaylen wasn't performing his best in the playoffs. But again, there was all this conversation about, hey, like, there's this looming decision for the Celtics front office, a looming contract negotiation for Jaylen Brown. Are they going to give him that supermax contract? Is he going to be eligible? It is such a burden off of his shoulders. Again, I have to imagine that he is now the highest paid player in NBA history, or at least was as of a couple months ago, whatever. For him to just be focused on hoop and a decision that I would imagine that's going to affect anybody. I don't care how much success you've had. I don't care how much financial security you already have. To have that type of decision literally being weeks away at the time of competing in the playoffs is so significant. And I do feel like Jalen's been playing his best basketball yet. And I don't think he's taken his foot off the gas now that he's received that money. There's obviously a certain direction that everybody can go once they get that money. If their work ethic increases, if they kind of take their foot off the gas, I don't feel like that's been the case with Jaylen Brown at all. Next point is that I think Derek White is the best version of Derek White we've ever seen with this team. And we know at this point in time, he's a stud who I feel like has at least gotten his flowers in terms of some national media attention, which I never would have expected this time last year. And more importantly, we just know he's going to be on the court. We know what his role is. There's not any more of that bullshit of him being unsure if he was even going to close games for this team, if he was going to get benched for guys like Marcus Smart, guys like Malcolm Brogdon down the stretch of games. That's just no longer the case. Derek White is the best version of himself, in large part because he has the most solidified role he's ever had in his career, certainly on a team this competitive. And everyone else, they benefit from experience as well. The fact that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown have played in a combined 200 playoff games in their career, it's actually 199 to be exact. But that being said, it's absolutely bonkers that these guys have competed in the postseason every single year of their career that they've been on the team. And I just think that it adds up, right? Even just the ability for them. And I don't really want to give the Celtics too much credit for falling down 3-0 to an 8 seed last year when they had the home court advantage, obviously. But that being said, the fact that they were able to battle back and be within a game of ultimately winning that series and making a second finals appearance, that stuff adds up. And I know some people and NBA Twitter and all that stuff can call them frauds and can say they're chokers and say this, say that. I genuinely, at this point in time, look at that stuff as a positive. And I actually think you're kind of a moron if you don't look at that stuff as a positive. I would take the Celtics' playoff scars and their playoff shortcomings every single day of the week over a team like Oklahoma City. They're sitting across the way. They're the number one seed in the Western Conference. How many playoff games have those guys played in? 0. They've played in a few play-in games that they've come up short. Like, Shea hasn't even played in like a real playoff series with the Thunder. I guess he did in the bubble, but it's a literal 0 for playoff experience for the core of that team compared to, again, 2 guys that have played a total of, basically 3 seasons combined of just postseason play. That stuff adds up. And so I look at that as a positive for the Celtics team. And let's just keep it pushing here and talking about like, hey, look, I'm not sitting up here and saying that the team is perfect. I'm not saying that they necessarily should be everybody's lock to win the championship and you guys should just place your bets right now, because there are certainly some scary factors about this team. And if I had to pick nits, which I think is exactly what I'm going to be doing with the team that's been this good so far, let's start off with the coaching, right? And I'm not necessarily saying that this is a negative, but we still have, in some ways, a question mark as our head coach. And I think it's really difficult to evaluate coaching in any capacity, so I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, especially because I'm sure Joe Mazzulla has forgotten more about basketball than I will ever know, and I don't pretend to know more than he does. But that being said, I feel like the most common criticisms of Joe Mazzulla last year really lent themselves to the late game execution, the late game play calling, the late game shot selection. All that stuff was really up in the air, a lot of those lineup decisions as well. And frankly, that's difficult to evaluate for the Celtics when the problem that they have as of right now is that the fact that they are just beating the shit out of teams so early that they are literally winning by the time the third quarter rolls around. Like, obviously that Golden State game was basically over after one quarter, and they've had other matchups like that throughout the season where it's not like they're getting into these clutch, close situation down to the wire games frequently. So it's pretty hard to evaluate what the Celtics have done better in terms of coaching. But if you had to pick a nit, is Joe Mazzulla going to get outcoached by an Eric Spoelstra, by a Tom Thibodeau, by a Mike Malone in Denver? Maybe. That's definitely a real question mark. So it's worth mentioning there. Obviously we already touched upon the health thing, but if you want to say that the Celtics have a 7'3" health concern, spearheading a lot of the things that they do on offense and defense, and I would say sure, but again, a lot of other teams have that concern as well. And I think this picking nit is probably the most interesting because I did see this surfaced out there. Folks were out there pointing out that would the Celtics have the best player in a playoff series? What percentage of the time anyway? Because I do think the answer is going to be an overwhelming yes, really, regardless of what matchup the Celtics get in the first round. Probably in round 2 as well. Really across the entire Eastern Conference, I think Tatum's literally the best player in the conference besides only Giannis. And then maybe Embiid and Philly. And I know in the regular season you're saying Embiid in the heartbeat, but let's just be honest. If you want to talk about playoff shortcomings, Embiid is a whole different category than Tatum. Tatum's had far more success in the postseason than Embiid has. And I'd probably go as far as to say I'd take Tatum in a playoff series over Embiid for what it's worth. But that being said, once the Celtics make it to the finals, the answer is almost certainly no. They would not have the best player in the series once they make it to the NBA finals, really not regardless of what team comes out of the West, but within reason, it is in all likelihood the Celtics would not have the pound for pound best player in a playoff series for whoever they would face in the NBA finals. But honestly, I just don't think that really matters with this team, with the version of this team that we have. The fact that there are so many different directions we can take on offense because the defense is so flexible, because we are so adaptable with different lineups we can throw out there and different schemes and different defensive philosophies. When again, you have four all NBA level talents on defense, then a 7'3" guy to really mix things up and then exploit mismatches on the other end. I still have confidence that wouldn't necessarily matter, but the way it boils down, sometimes it is really that simple. And when two teams are that evenly matched, having the better player in a series is that much of an advantage. But sure, if we're picking nits in this team, the Celtics, once they get to the finals, they're probably not going to have the best player in the series. My question to you would be, would that really matter? And then really the last nit to pick with this team is that I think over the past several years, from what I've seen, and I can't tell that if this is just Boston media being overcritical of their favorite team in town, but do the Celtics still play a little soft? Do you think that they could get roughed up and, out-toughed by a team like a Miami, like a New York, even Golden State, some of the things that we saw in the finals? It's definitely possible that, hey, look, especially in the absence of Marcus Smart, that this team could need to toughen up a little bit. But I look at the Smart departure, again, love his tenure in Boston as sort of a positive. The fact that it really has forced Tatum and Brown to grow up a bit and being the leaders in the locker room, the most tenured players in the team. I think that it's worth noting that those personnel changes, I think, make this team a little bit tougher with some of the guys we brought in. Bringing in a guy like Drew Holiday that doesn't take any shit. If you just want to sit there and say the team is soft, I think you're kind of running out of arguments to pick on this team. So in conclusion, what does all this mean? I'm telling you all these facts. I'm telling you all these potential counterpoints to how good the Celtics are. And why am I doing that? Because I'm starting to believe too much. To answer the question, is this the Celtics year? I think it is. And now, maybe I'm too close to the situation. Maybe I'm not the best person to ask. But I will say that this recent stretch of basketball that we've seen from the team has made me more confident than ever before that the Celtics have what it takes to get it done this year. And more practically, if you just ask me what my biggest fear is as a Celtics fan, it's the Denver Nuggets, and it's not even close. Because I do think Denver is at the same level, if not even better, than the Boston Celtics, just because they have what it takes to get it done. They obviously got over the hump last year and won the title in really impressive, commanding fashion as well. And every single time they're put to the test, even in this regular season, they get it done. A great example was on Saturday night when everybody knew LeBron was 9 points away from surpassing 40,000 points. The Lakers have a game at home against the defending champs. All the celebrities are out, all the coverage is there. The coverage of the game started what seemed like 3 hours before at that point. And it was an awesome game for the Lakers. I mean, LeBron was unbelievable. Anthony Davis was really solid. Austin Reeves was hitting shots. Rui Hachimura was hitting shots. D'Angelo Russell continued his hot play. That being said, they had no answer for the Denver Nuggets down the stretch. And I almost overlooked the fact that Michael Porter Jr. was literally perfect in that game. He had 25 points on literally perfect shooting, which is insane. But it wasn't even him down the stretch that killed the Lakers. It was just the fact that the Nuggets have this unstoppable two-man game. They absolutely know who they are. Their team fits so perfectly together. Jokic is making all the right plays, pulling all the right strings. Jamal Murray is still as terrifying as any player in the NBA when he's hot and engaged, and honestly has a chance to be one of the most underrated NBA players of all time when you look at what his legacy could be. And I'm getting totally derailed here talking about Denver. But that being said, Denver is that much of a foe. They are that scary to think about. And so they are far and away the team that I am scared the most of as a Celtics fan. And again, there is a world in which the Celtics lose to the Bucks and whatever, but frankly, they should be able to beat the Miami Heat, the New York Knicks, the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Sixers, and even the Bucks. I think the Celtics are that much more talented where I would be extremely, extremely disappointed and even go as far as to say this season is a disaster, bearing health, whatever, if this team does not at least make it to the NBA Finals with the type of team that we have. Now, that being said, let's finish this out on a positive note, because as I sit here and record this, I just have to acknowledge for 1 second just how spoiled I am as a Celtics fan. This team has really been on an unbelievable run, not just this season, but the fact that they've been able to maintain how competitive they've been for the past 7-8 years is really special stuff. And not only does this team just obviously play the right way and they're dominant on the court, but they say and do all the right things off the court as well. Like, especially now that Jalen's paid, and even that wasn't a storyline that was his fault or anything like that. There's not been one singular negative storyline around this Celtics team all year long. The guys just talk hoop. They don't get involved with any shit off the court that damages themselves, damages their brand, damages the team's brand. They're just an extremely likable group of guys, in addition to the fact that they're unbelievable basketball players. So I'm not taking a second of this season for granted. I am enjoying this Celtics season more than really any other Celtics season in recent memory. This is an unbelievable run by my favorite franchise. And this team's already in special territory in terms of where this team is being viewed compared to other teams in the league and other teams historically. And I think they're deserving of it. In terms of tangible changes that I'm going to make instead of just worrying about Denver, I'm just going to start becoming a much more obnoxious fan of this team because I'm more confident in this team than I've ever been before, and at least in recent memory. I know I picked the Celtics in past years just because, it's more of like a why not us scenario based on the competition around us. And now I'm pretty damn sure it's us. It's really us in Denver, and anybody that's not taking a Boston versus Denver finals, which again was my pick before the season for what it's worth, I think you're just kind of attention baiting at that point in time because there are two teams levitating above the rest of the field. And I'm feeling really good about ourselves. That just about puts a bow on it. I know it doesn't feel right talking Celtics without my guy RJ, but again, we will bring him on and do a deeper dive on the Celtics round one opponent and playoff expectations and all that before the playoffs start in a couple months. But while the national media is just doing laps talking about how good the Celtics are, I had to get in on the fun, finally break my silence on what has been an unbelievable team to watch. So that being said, before I let you guys go, be sure to follow At Words with Wallace on everything. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss a new episode. That includes At Words with Wallace on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Also follow on social media, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok as well. Check out all the content that I'm uploading there. And I will talk to you guys next week. Peace.